Okay, so here we are in Blender. I'm going to hit General. When the default cube appears, I'm going to click on it and hit Delete to delete it. Now we are going to import our asset. Import FBX, GLB. Navigate to the GLB file and import. So now we can see our asset has imported in. I am going to select the quarter filled in sphere over here to see the textures. So we can see that the texture seems to be okay. I'm also going to go to View, Front, so I can see which way the asset is facing. In this case, it's facing the wrong way, but let's not worry about that. When we go into Taleweaver, we're going to be able to correct that, so let's not worry about it here. I can pan around in this view by holding Shift and then holding the middle mouse button and dragging. So I'm just going to center this a little bit so it's better. We can also see that the asset seems to be level with the ground, so that's perfect. So the first thing we want to do is we want to combine all of these textures because Taleweaver can only have one texture and one mesh. So we want to make sure that we've got the textures combined. So if you installed the Material Combiner plugin, if you're on the if your mouse is over the main screen and you hit N, you should see the toolbar open here, and we got Material Combiner. So with this asset selected, I'm going to hit Generate Materials List, and we can see those are all of the materials that are being used by this asset. What we're going to do is we're going to hit the Save Atlas to. That's going to ask for a location to save it to. I'm going to go back to the location where I had the asset and hit Create. So you can see that it did change the texture a little bit. This is because if you have many textures, some of them have metallic, some of them have roughness, and now when it combines that, it only combines the diffuse. So we're it changes a little bit of the appearance of the textures, but for the most part, the textures are preserved now in one big texture file. So now, if we look at this asset, it is actually in a pose. We don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to down here on the timeline. We are going to go, instead of the timeline, we're going to go to non-linear animation. This is basically a list of all the animations that are included with this asset. I'm going to make this window bigger so we can see what's going on. And now we can choose any of these animations. So if I, for example, choose the third one here, you want to make sure that this box is checked and that the lock is unchecked. Then you want to click over here to highlight the animation sequence and hit Tab. If everything has, if it was done correctly, you can see that the color has changed, and you can see that the position, the pose has also changed. And now if I scrub through, I can see all the frames of that animation. So we need to decide which frame we want to export, because again, Taleweaver does not do animations. It's static, so we need a static pose. So I'm going to go, let's say, with this. And now that we've got our pose ready, the easiest way that I found to export this pose as a static mesh and basically remove the armature and all that kind of stuff is to save it as a OBJ file, because OBJ files don't support armatures, they don't support light, they don't support camera, so none of that will be exported. So if we export that out, we're just going to get the mesh, and we're going to get an MTL file with the texture file exported. And that's all we really need for Taleweaver. So we don't even need to come back here and import it. We're just going to export as OBJ. We're going to get the OBJ file. We're going to get an MTL file, which we don't need. and we'll get the texture file. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to click on the asset in the window again. I'm going to go to File, Export, and I'm going to go to Wavefront OBJ. And you can keep all of this as is. Go to here. I'm going to save it with test2, export to Wave, and that should be it. If we now look at our location where we exported that, we can see I saved text2. So we have the text2 object here, which we can use in Taleweaver, and we have the texture right here. Every time you do the save atlas, it'll save it with a file name called atlas and an incremental number if you happen to have more than one atlas in the folder. So right here is the mesh, and that's the texture, and that's all we need. Again, the orientation of the asset was incorrect. It was facing off to the left, not forward, but we can fix that up when we're actually creating the Taleweaver asset using the Taleweaver project. So this is all that you need. Okay, so now that we have exported our asset from Blender, we're going to fire up the Taleweaver Lite project within Unity. When it loads, it should load something like this. The layout of all these panels may be slightly different. You can rearrange that, but you should have a creature mod panel. So what first we're going to do is in our project, we're going to make a folder for the files that we're going to use. So I'm going to go over here, and in here I'm going to create a folder. So I'm just going to go create a folder, and then I'm going to call this test2. You call this whatever you want, preferably something that indicates what kind of asset it is. Then I'm going to go inside that folder by double clicking, and we're going to go right click, import new asset. Now that's going to allow you to navigate to the asset that we exported. So again, we want to import that OBJ file that we exported because that is got our static pose. It has reference to the texture which we have, and it's going to strip out all of your stuff like the armature, which Taleweaver can't use anyways. So let's import that in. Okay, and then the other thing that we want to do is right click, import new asset again, and select the texture file. So in this case, I already used the combiner once before, so I want to have the latest combined texture, and I'm going to import that. Okay, so now we can start with creating the actual asset. So under display name, we want to give it a name. I'm going with test2, but again, you're going to want to name it after the asset that you're creating, so that when people see that name, they'll know what it is, as opposed to something like test2. Under mesh, we're going to hit the little target at the end of the line. That's going to list all of the meshes that you have imported, and we need to find our mesh. I believe that it is this guy, default. Yes. So I'm going to select that mesh, close this up, and we can see that the character has the mesh has shown up over here. Next, we've got the albedo, normal, and Major file. In our case, we only have the albedo, which is the diffuse texture map, so we are going to ignore these two. Again, if you have these, you can use them, but they're not necessary. So all we're going to do is take our texture file, drag it over to the little box. You can't drag it to anywhere here. You need to drag and drop it to the tiny little box at the far end. Now we're going to get a warning here that says texture is not readable. That is normal. We're just going to scroll down a little bit, and there's this little button here that says attempt to change texture import settings to fix issues. And we're going to hit that. Once we do that, that warning should go away. Just for reference, we also see here the vertices count. If this number is over 60,000, it's not going to allow you to make the asset until you reduce it. You can reduce the poly count by clicking this checkbox here, and then there'll be a slider to reduce it. But all of these assets are very simple. You can see that we're only 1.3 K instead of 60, so we're good. Okay, so we've got this. Again, we said normal and Maiora file we can ignore. We can zoom in here a little bit. So there's this little compass thingy over here. If you click on any of these parts, it'll basically rotate your view. If you click on these, you can get the top-down view. If you hit the center box, it goes between like a perspective view to a non-perspective view. So you can toggle between those. If you're trying to position your asset correctly, I would go with this view because you don't have the skew of the perspective. Yeah. So anyways, we're about to get to that. We do have this add paint wash, so you can toggle on and off to see which looks better. In some cases it might look the same, so it doesn't matter. In other cases it might change the texture on that asset a little bit. So try which one you like. It should also be noted that due to the lighting in Tailspire, the texture that you saw in Blender and the texture that you will see in Unity and then eventually in Tailspire will be also a little bit different. Tailspire seems to give kind of a little bit of a brownish tinge to the assets. So again, you might have to play with it a little bit if you're trying to get an exact match. Okay, so now we need to position the asset correctly. We can see that it imported with the asset. This is our tile here. I can flip like that to see a little bit better. So we can see that right now we are not on the middle of the tile, and it looks like we're not facing the wrong way, which we expected, right? The arrow is pointing that way, yet this guy's facing this way, which is, we saw that in Blender, and we can compensate for that here. So first we're going to flip back to this view, and I'm going to go focus for translation. When I do that, you can see little arrows up here, and now we can drag those arrows to drag our asset. So I can see the tile here. I want to put that guy in the middle of the tile. Now, it's up to you, in this particular case, whether or not you want to put the feet in the center, or if you want to put the feet a little bit back because, the sword and that creature's leaning forward. So it's up to you how you want to do that. If you go with part of the mesh far beyond the tile, Taleweaver will prevent you from being able to create the asset. So in this particular case, I'm going to go and I'm going to make the feet be near the back of the tile so that, we're trying to keep as much of that asset within the tile space. I'm going to rotate it this way so I can see if the left right is about right, so mostly. So that looks good right now, I think. So now we can focus for rotation. So as we said, if we look from a top-down view, right now the asset is facing this way, but he's supposed to be facing that way. So I'm just going to grab the green circle and rotate. And by doing so, it looks like we've thrown off the translation. So I'm going to go back to translate, and I'm going to move him in the center. So now if I go forward, that looks pretty good. This, move it a little bit this way. Okay, and now from a top-down view, he looks like, or she, I don't know if it's a he or she, looks like to be facing in the right direction. So I think we're good. And now we've got scaling. So we can focus for scaling. That allows us to resize this character. But if we scroll down a little bit, we've got this reference here. So there's a window over here. We can see the ground. And if we check box this show creatures for scale, we can see, if we scroll along, various creatures and how they compare to the size of our creature. So I'm thinking that this creature is probably supposed to be about the size of a human. So we've got one example here. We've got one example here. So it's looking pretty good. We might want to resize it a tiny bit. So if we click on the middle box here and drag, it's going to resize all of the dimensions at the same time. So that's typically what you want to do. If you if you hit the boxes of any of the individual lines, that would be resizing only in that direction. So if I grab this and then I resize, you can see immediately it is resizing in that window. So if I do something like this, and we can also see though now where our feet are a little bit under the ground because we resized. So we're going to go back to translation and move the guy up a little bit, something like that. So I think that's pretty good. It looks like right now he's a little bit taller than this guy, but not quite as tall as this guy, so that's probably good. So that's our translation, rotation, and scaling. So next thing we need to define for Taleweaver is various hit locations. So the first one is the head. So all we're going to do is we're going to click on select head. Then we're going to get these, again, bars, and we're going to move it up to the head. So I'm going to move it up here. Now we want to go, then we're going to want to turn sideways so we can see where the head is this way, and do something like that. All right. Now we're going to go spell target. This is if your character would be using spells where the spell effect would originate. So I think when you do like the attacks and you do like the magic missile attack or one of those, this is where it's going to originate. So for this character, let's say that he's got the magic sword. So we are going to make the spell effect start somewhere here, like on his sword. Again, this is completely your choice. You know, this not being a spell caster, I'm not gonna make it, you know, go from his hand or something like that. I figure if this guy's a fighter with a sword, spell effects might go from his weapon. Then we have got the hit target, which is normally the center of the body. So we're going to move this to somewhere here, flip it this way, move it like that. Okay, and lastly, we've got the torch light. The torch light is usually supposed to be about at eye level and in front of the character. So I will go here, torch, and we might go somewhere out here, again, kind of on the sword or maybe in front. It doesn't really matter. And that's it for the hit locations. So the last thing that we've got to do is we've got the thumbnail camera and the portrait camera. So the thumbnail camera is the icon that is going to show up in the menu for this asset. So I am going to click on select thumbnail camera. And again, we've got these arrows here that represent the camera. So if I scroll up, usually I like to do the top-down view so we can see a little bit better where the camera is. And probably we might want a little bit more of a close-up. So let's go like that. Flip back to the... So maybe something like this. Totally up to you, but that seems decent. And then we have the photo camera. This view here is typically used if you are uploading your asset to mod.io. So if you are just using it the asset locally because you do not have permissions to share it, you don't need to really worry about this one. But if you're uploading to mod.io, this can get you the image that you're going to need to put on mod.io as the main image for the asset. So again, here we might want a more full body view. So I'm going to move this back. At some point, you hit the clipping pane, and it will make things disappear. So ideally you want to find somewhere where you're showing most of the asset or all of the asset, but not being clipped off. So something like this. Sometimes I like to do a little bit of a little bit of like a side view. So I'll go like this, and then I'll hit R for rotate. Sorry, E for rotate, and do something like that. Probably should have done that in the opposite direction. So something like that maybe. Again, that's totally up to you. And once you've got that done, then all we need to do is we need to first, regardless of whether or not you're saving this for I/O, you need to do the save first. The save is going to ask you what name you want to use for it. So I'm just going to go with test2. Again, use a much better save name when you're saving it so that you know what it is. But when I hit save, that saves the TS mod file. The TS mod file is a file that you can use locally to test your asset, or if you do not have permissions to share the asset. For example, if you bought the asset from a store and the license does not allow you to share it, then you can share it with a small group of people that you're playing with, but you can't put it on a site like mod.io. So in that case, you can use the TS mod file directly. You have to give your other players a copy of it so that they can also use that file, but then you're using the TS mod file directly. If you do have permissions to share the asset, then a much better process is to then put it into mod.io, because one, other people can benefit from it, and two, it's much easier to share it with your players because they don't need a local copy. As soon as you add that asset from mod.io into your game, the rest of your players will get prompted with a prompt if they want to download the asset, or if in their settings they've set it to automatically accept, it'll get downloaded for them automatically. So that way you don't have to go and share any local files manually. So in all cases though, you first need to save with the TS file. Then if you're planning on uploading to mod.io, you then want to hit the export for mod.io button. Now you'll notice that when I hit the export for mod.io button, it didn't ask me for a name, and that is because it uses the same name as what you did the save with. So if I look at my folder now of my assets, you will see that I have the TS mod file. That's what I saved. And then when I did the export for mod.io, it created the test2 zip file. So this is what you would upload to mod.io, and it uses the same name as whatever I saved the TS mod file with. And that's basically it. Now you've got the files for adding this to Taleweaver locally, and also for uploading it to mod.io. Okay, so now you have a Taleweaver asset made. You've got the TS mod file and you've got the zip file. So again, the TS mod file is for using the asset locally. If you choose to go with that method, all of your players need to have a copy of that asset locally in order for it to work. The zip file is for uploading to mod.io. As long as you have the permissions to do so, that is the better way to go because it makes sharing easy. But please respect the license agreement of the asset that you are making. If it is not your own and you got it from a different source, please make sure that it allows mass sharing, because you do not want to use the asset illegally. Okay, so let's start with the local file. That's the TS mod file. How do we use it? Well, with Windows Explorer open, we are going to go to App Data, and then we want to go one folder out. So not in roaming, we want to go to Local O. There you will find Bouncy Rock Entertainment and Taleweaver. And you can see that one of the folders that you will have there is called Local Content Pack. This is where you can throw in any of your TS mod files and they will become available in the game. You can actually do that even while Taleweaver is running. So if you are in the middle of a session and realize that you forgot to throw in one of your assets into this folder, you can do that while it is running. So I'm going to actually go back to my folder where I have the asset. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to run it back over to that folder and drop it in there. So using the asset locally, if we now run Taleweaver, I'm going to start in vanilla. I could start modded, but it will work in vanilla. Taleweaver assets don't need any kind of modded Taleweaver or plugins, so I will demonstrate that. It's taking a little while. There we go. Just a little slower than usual. Okay. So, any asset that you add this local way will show up in the regular Talespire library under creatures, obviously, and then it's always placed under a folder called local. So if we scroll down to the bottom, we'll get this other section, and we have local there. So that is where all assets put into that local folder will appear. So if we now grab that, we can see there is our asset. So not quite sure if it was the right decision to have the asset kind of be at the back of the tile. But again, that's up to you. You know, you can fix that in Taleweaver if you don't like that. You can actually go back to Taleweaver and load the tsmod file. So like if you wanted to, for example, correct this and make him be standing more in the center of that tile, you can go back into the Taleweaver project, load the tsmod file, and then use the translate option that we saw earlier to move the asset more to the center. But anyways, so that's where that appears. If you upload the asset to mod.io, I'm not going to go through that process here. You can, I'm sure you can figure that out or get some directions online. But if you do that, then you can then access it through the in-game browser, which is this over here. And if we go here to creatures, you can see all of the creatures that have been created by various community users. There is a search that allows you to narrow down that filter. It's not a very good one. If you search for something like, well, let's not get into that. But anyways, so once you find an asset that you want from mod.io, you can just click on it, and you can see that the asset has now turned color, which means that you've downloaded it. You also have a link here to unlink it, basically get rid of it if you're no longer using it. But now we've basically added this to our game. It's not yet on the board, but it's been kind of added to our game so that we can use it. If we now go back to our library, so remember all of the local assets showed up under this local folder. Well, all of the mod.io assets that you've added to your game show up under the community tab. So same thing, they're always in the same location under community. So there's the Fisher Folk that I just downloaded, and now we can add that to our game. So the important thing here is, as I said previously, if we add the asset through mod.io, we don't need to worry about other players also having that asset or adding it from mod.io to their game, because as soon as I don't know if it happens when I added the asset to the game or when I drop it to the board, but at one of those points, the players will get a prompt saying, new asset to be downloaded, and they'll have an option to say yes or no. Typically, you want to say yes, otherwise you're going to not see that asset where everybody else does. And I think there's even a setting that allows you to automatically say yes to when GM adds assets, so you don't have to keep answering yes. So it makes it much easier to share the asset than if you're using the local, because if you're using the local, you need to put it into your local folder, but all of your players also need to put it in their local folder. And that's about it. That's how you can get your Taleweaver assets into Talespire.